What is going on, everybody? Here we are for another episode of the Hammerfist MMA Podcast. This is episode number 4. I am here with you again. My name is Tyler, and welcome everyone to the show. It's a special day today. Today is March 2nd of 2019. The most stacked UFC event of the year so far is upon us in just a few hours. And I cannot wait, guys. It is going to be great. UFC 235 from Las Vegas, Nevada. It's almost 2 p.m. Eastern, so we've got 4 or 5 hours before the first fights of the night get started. And I absolutely cannot wait. This is going to be a great one. We're going to go right into that. The month of March as a whole is looking great, in particular for the UFC. Got a total of 5 UFC events this month. We're going to look at what those are, run through that a little bit, and then our first event of April is actually going to be here right where I live. I've just found out not too long ago when it was announced it was going to take place here in Atlanta. So it looks like I'll be going to a couple live events here in short order. That's looking to be a very good pay-per-view event as well, and I absolutely cannot wait for that either. So we're going to go through some of these big fights going on tonight. We've got 2 title fights in one event. Always love when we've got a title fight on the line in the main and co-main event. So we'll get right into it. Just real quick first, I want to mention, guys, thanks everyone who's tuning in. Love to see you throw some comments up. Been getting some good feedback on the podcast and the blog. And like I always say, love to continue to see more and more of that, just so we can keep making this something that is enjoyable for people to watch and take part in, and just promote discussion amongst more and more folks who enjoy watching MMA and UFC. You can hit me up on Twitter right over here at Hammerfist_MMA, or come check out the blog, hammerfistmma.com. So let's get right into it, guys. Let's get started with what we got going on tonight. If somehow you have been under a rock and don't know what's going on, here we have the main card right here, guys. It's going to be excellent. It's a very special day, like I said. Even taking drinking a nice little soda here today. Walmart special, Dr. Thunder. Unfortunately, these days, if you want to be able to afford all the different venues and things you need to pay for in order to watch every UFC event, including pay-per-views, ESPN via cable service, and ESPN Plus, most likely you'll be poor enough either to not have liberties such as soda, and if you do, Dr. Thunder. So there we have it, guys. So let's get right into it. First thing we can see when we look at this card, everyone, 4 of these 5 fights, either current champions or former champions as part of the fight. So as we're saying, this thing is totally stacked, and this is just the main card, and this is just going to be great. This is going to be amazing. I know I've talked to a bunch of people. There's a bunch of people out there that if you've been living under a rock as well, and don't know that there's ways you can see these events outside of the traditional venue of paying for them. It is out there. A lot of those people I've talked to, they're doing a once-in-a-lifetime thing that they don't normally do, and actually paying for an event to support it, simply because it is going to be so awesome. Very surprising to hear, but hey, it's all good. It's all good. I guess as long as you get to watch it, whatever way you watch it, doesn't really matter. So we're going to run through this real quick, and then we'll even look at the undercard as well. Like I was saying, this thing is totally stacked from basically top to bottom. Here right now we can only see the main card that's on pay-per-view, but the rest that you can catch on ESPN and Fight Pass is equally pretty good. So let's start right at the bottom. And surprising to say, this is the first fight on the pay-per-view portion of the card. Former bantamweight champ Cody Garbrandt is making a return since his last and rematch with current champ TJ Dillashaw, taking on an up-and-comer in Pedro Munoz. Both of these guys come in basically looking to bang it out. This is one you can expect to be quite the barn burner with a lot of back and forth. Cody is a super fast striker, really focused, strength in boxing, came into MMA from a boxing background. So he'll be really heavy on the striking, obviously, as we have seen in his other fights. And his opponent, Pedro Munoz, coming off of a couple of just different, really excellent, really amazing fights as well. It's kind of a match of the unstoppable force in Cody Garbrandt's striking and the immovable object in Pedro Munoz's chin. Let's see what's going to happen. I think this will end up being a bit of a rebound for Cody Garbrandt. His only two losses are both against TJ Dillashaw, initially when he lost the belt, and more recently when he challenged in a rematch. Both times, unfortunately, he was finished very quickly in the second and first round, respectively. But like I said, Pedro is a super tough guy. He has got a heck of a chin on him. You know, this may not really even go to a finish necessarily because Munoz is really tough, and I think Garbrandt is probably fast enough in his defensive movements that he can avoid being finished by a knockout or a TKO. Compared to when he was fighting someone like TJ Dillashaw, who was what seems to be a little more equal in speed and matched as far as striking a little bit. So I think this one may go to a decision, but I'd have to predict it's going to end up going to Cody Garbrandt. I continue, regardless of his most recent fights being losses in pretty devastating fashion, both being knockouts. I always think back to when he won the belt in fighting Dominic Cruz, and just the way he picked him apart. It was all speed. It was just something that, surprisingly enough, Dominic Cruz just couldn't match, and he got caught multiple times and was basically dominated in a decision. So I have a feeling that this fight may go in a similar way. Like I said, I don't think it's going to come to a finish. I think it's going to come to a decision, but I think Cody Garbrandt will be on the rebound here, and it will get back in the win column. Probably with a win. He's still very high ranked, obviously in the top 5, right near the very top. I don't know if he's going to immediately really be thinking it's time to fight for a title again. Bantamweight has gotten a little bit backed up now that we had TJ Dillashaw move down to 125 and fight Henry Cejudo for the flyweight belt. Now there's all this talk about Cejudo coming up or doing the fight at flyweight again. So it's really backed some things up in the top of bantamweight, and we've got plenty of other excellent contenders that are right there at the top. Marlon Moraes obviously comes to mind, having fought maybe a month ago and finished Rafael Assunção. So he's still right there at the top, and unfortunately bantamweight is backing up just a little bit, getting a little backed up at the top of the line, basically. Now, if Munoz wins, on the other hand, he'd be in a pretty good spot to challenge someone like Marlon Moraes, or if they end up maybe doing an interim bantamweight belt, just depending what else happens with current champ TJ Dillashaw and layoffs and things like that. Just all this discussion back and forth with him fighting Cejudo again at either weight, any kind of nonsense like that. I think we'll just have to see what happens, but that's what I would predict for this one, guys. Probably going to a decision. And next up, we have got a women's strawweight fight. Tecia Torres, well-known top 10 contender, essentially. Recently enough, she lost to the former champion in Joanna, defeated via decision pretty handedly, unfortunately for her, but still great record at 10-3. Still an excellent contender in the strawweight division. Along with the up-and-comer in Weili Zhang. Unfortunately, I have to say I don't know a whole lot about her. I'm almost positive I've seen her fight at least a couple times in the UFC, and obviously with the record she's got at 18-1 is pretty good. Coming into this fight, they ended up throwing her in the top 15. I think she's at 15 or something like that. But like I said, honestly, I haven't seen and can't recall a whole lot about her, if I'm being honest. Hey, kitty. Now, Tisha, on the other hand, I am fairly familiar with, going back to the strawweight season of The Ultimate Fighter when she was on there, and really kind of coming up through the ranks, kind of hovering around 5 to 10 as far as the rankings go. I would have to suggest and predict that this one will probably go to a decision as well. And this one, I'm going to guess, is going to go to the Tiny Tornado via decision in Tisha Torres. But we'll see what happens, guys. Let me know what you think. Throw some info down in the comments. Let me know how you think this one is going to go. Alrighty, and next up, it's only up from here, guys. As we move up this card, as far as the pay-per-view is concerned, 3 more fights, and these are all looking to be amazing fights. Like I was saying earlier, former champions in 4 of these 5 fights. This one is going to be contested at welterweight. We've got the former welterweight champ in Ruthless Robbie Lawler, obviously coming out every time, putting on an amazing show. Who doesn't love to watch this guy fight? That's the question that comes to mind. Who doesn't love to watch this guy fight? His nickname that goes right along with it, goes right along with his fighting style, Ruthless. That's exactly how it is when you see him fight. You think back to his amazing fights with Carlos Condit and Rory McDonald. Definitely, that was an amazing fight. Fought Cerrone at 170, beat Cowboy, and now he's got the UFC newcomer in Ben Askren. So if you don't know a lot about Ben Askren, if you get into MMA and kind of are focused on the UFC in particular, you may not be horribly familiar with this guy, Ben Askren. However, outside of the UFC, he's definitely a very well-known figure as far as MMA is concerned. He was one of the very first welterweight champs in Bellator. I think somebody had won the inaugural welterweight belt in Bellator, and he was the first challenger, essentially. Won that, was the Bellator welterweight champ for something like 1,100 days, something like that. Long time, years. Longest reigning champion in Bellator's history, if I'm correct. So leaves out of Bellator, ends up at one championship, kind of the primary Asian MMA promotion of the Asian part of the world. Becomes welterweight champ over there in one championship, and has been fighting over there for a number of years. Equally long reign over there, and obviously still undefeated, 18-0 with 1 no contest, so he's never been beaten. He has only basically forfeited these belts by not continuing or moving to other promotions. Obviously surrounding this guy, he's got the whole back and forth with Dana White. Long ago, he had something like 6-7 years ago called Dana White out about when Dana White had said at one point in the past, it'd be impossible to drug test and test all UFC athletes on a consistent basis for steroid use and performance enhancing drugs and things like that. Ben Askren called him out, basically said, you know what you're talking about. Obviously, it's done with Olympics and basically every other sport, kind of worldwide sport that's out there. And ironically enough, here we have just a few years ago in 2016 or whenever it was, USADA comes on board, and there's a consistent drug test policy basically for all UFC athletes that's happening, all the time nowadays, and it's just kind of a well-known part of the sport, which makes sense and is fine. Obviously don't want to have guys using steroids and all this kind of stuff. So anyway, getting past all that, let's talk about this actual fight. Like I said, with Robbie Lawler, his name goes perfect with his fighting style, ruthless. He's going to be looking to come in there and just try and tear Ben Askren up, essentially. But Ben Askren, if you're not too familiar with him, his specialty is wrestling. Going back to college, this guy actually wrestled with a guy we'll get to here in just a minute, in the welterweight champion Tyron Woodley. Wrestled together at University of Missouri. Ben Askren actually ended up competing in the Olympics at one point in, I think, 2008, something like that. So obviously a very strong wrestler, going to be very good on the ground. He'll be looking to take Robbie Lawler down and just beat him up on the ground. So kind of thinking back historically, off the top of my head, I cannot think of a time when Robbie Lawler has been tremendously challenged in the wrestling and takedown department. I can't think off the top of my head, what kind of stats he's got as far as takedown defense and, defense on the ground, things like that. I feel like every time I see Robbie Lawler fight, it's just a back and forth, swing and bang kind of match, which is great. Unfortunately, in this case, I do predict probably what's going to happen is Askren will find a way to get him to the ground in any number of rounds that it goes. Lawler's a super tough guy, so even if he's on the ground getting beat up, he's, at least for a good period of the fight, I don't think it's going to happen right away or anything like that. If he does happen to get finished, I do ultimately think that Ben Askren is going to win the fight. Could quite possibly be a decision, just from getting wrestled and taken down to the ground in all 5 rounds. And here we have Ben Askren on the top of him, just beating up on him. Lawler is a tough enough guy that he'll keep moving and, at the very least, fight not to get finished. However, he's got obvious knockout power and very strong finishing power. So if Askren gets caught, that could be the end of it. I do, however, predict that Ben Askren will come into the UFC, making his UFC debut at 18-0, and come out at 19-0, find his way into the top 5 of welterweight, and keep it moving. Hopefully going to be an exciting fight. I know, unfortunately, with strong wrestlers, there's a tendency to find some boredom in watching some of these fights. If it's just primarily a wrestling match and striking is very limited, that can get quite boring for the viewers. But we'll see what happens. So let's move on to our co-main and main events of the evening. Co-main event, welterweight title is on the line with title holder Tyron Woodley. This will be his 5th defense, if I'm thinking of it correctly. Ironically enough, initially won the belt from the man just below him in Robbie Lawler a ways back. I think when Woodley fought Till was back in September of last year, was his 4th title defense, so this will be his 5th. The challenger is Mr. 30% himself, Kamaru Usman. 30% will do him nothing in this fight. He'll be easily finished if that's the case here. However, just coming off of Usman's win over RDA a few months back, definitely beat him, very handedly, I have to say. All bias aside, I'll just make it very apparent that I personally am not any big fan of Kamaru Usman. I think the way he talks and some of the things he says and does are just goofy and stupid, and to beat someone and then say, oh, I beat him handedly, but I was only 30%, is kind of just disrespectful and stupid while the guy is still, over there recovering on the other side of the octagon. It's just kind of a shitty and dumb thing to say, so I'm not a fan, and the stuff he says is just goofy and stupid, and a lot of his fights are, quite honestly, kind of boring, if I do say so myself. Go on, kitty cat. I honestly would have really rather have liked to see Colby Covington in this fight. Was the interim champ, allegedly turned a fight down, back in September when Till ended up fighting Woodley. Obviously, you imagine, all right, that one passes, Covington will be next. Then Usman comes in and has this, excellent performance to defeat RDA. Dana White and the UFC folks give the fight to Kamaru Usman to challenge Tyron Woodley. So do I think that Usman has a chance to win? Absolutely. Despite what I think about, how he acts or anything like that, he is a good fighter. I can't say that his skills are lacking or anything like that. But let's not underestimate the champ in Tyron Woodley. He's a very, very talented fighter as well. Usman is a super strong wrestler, but Woodley is also a super strong wrestler. Like we were saying, Ben Askren and Tyron Woodley were both wrestlers at University of Missouri in Division I. Apparently, Usman was a Division II wrestling champ in college. Woodley claims there is this massive distinction between Division I and II when it comes to wrestling. Personally, don't really know. Don't really watch college wrestling, so like I said, certainly don't know. Anyway, I'd love to see Woodley win. I'd love to see Usman get knocked out and Woodley take the win via knockout, maintain the belt. That's just me. Do I think it's going to happen? It's possible. Certainly anything is possible. It could be the other way around. Usman could knock Woodley out. I think that's less probable, but could happen. I think what's going to happen is Usman is going to try to wrestle Woodley and get on the top of him. Thinking back to, as far as size is concerned, the size of these gentlemen, when Usman was in there with RDA. Now, RDA, granted, coming up from being a former 155er, Usman just looked huge. His stature looked so much bigger, his frame, everything about him just looked very, very large compared to RDA. Almost like it was a mismatch of size, really, by the size of these guys. Now, Woodley is no small welterweight. He's super athletic, all muscle. Doesn't have the biggest frame on him. He's only 5'9", which feels a little bit short for welterweight, but I think it's just probably all that muscle he carries and everything that he's super strong. Honestly, I don't know what to think. I don't know. I'm not sure what I think is going to happen. What I hope happens, like I said, is I hope that Woodley knocks Usman out in quick fashion, shuts him up. He goes away for a little bit, and then Colby Covington comes in and fights Tyron Woodley. Next time Woodley fights and defends the belt again. That's what I'm looking for. That's what I hope's happened. Honestly, I don't know what to think. I don't know what to think is going to happen in this fight. Another side of me does think that Usman really could be the guy that comes in and challenges Woodley, and not to finish in a devastating fashion or anything like that, but pretty powerful level of talent and skill that he's got, just seeing some of his prior fights. A lot of these guys he's fought, Damian Maia, RDA, in his more recent fights, they were dominant wins. They really were. As much as I hate to say that for not being a big fan of the guy, got to be real in saying that he has won his recent fights in pretty dominating fashion. So let's see what happens, guys. I can't wait. I cannot wait. It's going to be great. Another few hours to go here. So, main event. Jon Jones is back and pulsing yet again. Drug test stuff aside, we all know what's going on with that. It has been confirmed with all the various VADA, USADA, Nevada State, California State, all these different drug testing things that he's going through leading up to this. Basically, his past 4 or 5 drug tests he's had as of like a day ago, bookended by 2 negative tests showing nothing, was 2 positive test results for this metabolite, this pictogram of shit from a tainted supplement, whatever. That's old news at this point, essentially. But the fact is, it does remain, so we're not going to get too much into that. The word is out there. Whatever you think, end of the day, whether you agree with it or not, UFC has discussed it with state athletic commissions where he's fighting, both in California and now in Nevada and Las Vegas. And they either don't care or they believe the science enough that it is what it is and it's going to keep happening. Let's make this thing happen and get these fights going. Jon Jones is back. Fought most recently Alexander Gustafsson, dominated the hell out of him, surprisingly enough. That was an unfortunate event for Gustafsson. Regardless, regained the light heavyweight belt, and now taking on the man who has been just blasting up the ranks and winning some amazing fights in Anthony Smith. I've become a pretty big fan of Anthony Smith, and I would love to see him win. I would love to see him catch Jones the way he's caught these other guys. A lot of people's argument to his rise is, well, he moved up to light heavyweight from middleweight, and he fought guys that were ranked, but guys that were old, veterans of the game, Rashad Evans, Shogun Hua, guys like that that are, old and past their prime, that they gave a big presence and they showed up in the rankings because of, who they were and having fought great fights in the past and won a lot of fights in the past, but being past their physical prime and at the age that they're at made easy pickings for a younger guy in Anthony Smith. Now, if we look at the number of fights he had, he's got a heck of a lot of experience. Much more than the fights as far as quantity that Jones has had. But unfortunately, we've not seen anyone yet in fighting John Jones that has matched the fight IQ he shows when he's in the octagon. Putting these different things together in there. He comes in every time. Whether it's game planning or whatever else it may be, it's undoubtable that the fight IQ he's got is very, very high. Whoever he's fighting may take a round to adapt to, having that person physically in front of them, that exact person that they've been planning for, and just seems to pick them apart and win every time, literally except for his one loss being via disqualification. Now, Anthony Smith, on the other hand, it almost feels he'll be coming in just like all of his most recent fights at light heavyweight, coming in, putting the heat on a little bit, and finally, after pressure that becomes overwhelming, he closes the gap and puts the heat on enough that he connects with a few good shots. He's definitely got the knockout power. Or enough to stumble someone, put them on wobbly legs or on their back, and finish from that point. I feel like if he wins, that is going to be the way that it's done. Am I pulling for him? Absolutely. Like I said, I've become quite the fan of this guy, and watching his fights, it's always very exciting to see him fight. Love to hear his story. Guy from a small town that just kind of ended up in this thing, and it all worked out for him. I'd love to see him at the top. It'd be a great story. Do I think his chances of winning are very great? Unfortunately, no, not necessarily. Just because of, John Jones, everybody knows what he does bring is very, very strong. So I do predict that Jones is probably going to win. However, I will say that I'm definitely pulling for Anthony Smith. So it's going to be here in a few hours, guys. Can't wait to see it. Let's see what happens. This is going to be great. Now, aside from this is only the main card. We're not going to speak on every fight in the undercard, but I just wanted to pull that up as well, just in case anyone has forgotten what else we've got on this. Like I've been touting, it's totally stacked from top to bottom. So just take a gander here. Look at these great fights we've got. There are two additional fights that are on the early prelims. They are less stacked. They're more early prelim worthy, if you will. So I don't have them listed here, but even if we start at the bottom of this, these are the fights that are going to be on ESPN tonight, starting at 8 p.m. Eastern. This is kicking off with the inaugural Ultimate Fighter Season 1 winner, Diego Sanchez, back at welterweight. Veteran and legend in his own right. Kooky guy, crazy on social media, all that good stuff. Big media presence. Taking on Mickey Gall. Much younger guy, obviously much less experience in only 6 fights. But he's definitely had some good ones. This was a guy that came off of what is it? Dana White's looking for a fight, calling out CM Punk, all that came in. I will. Let's say this too. Two of his wins are CM Punk, who he dominated within 30 seconds. He had him on the ground, and that was the end of the fight, basically. And Mike the Truth Jackson, who unfortunately, per Dana White's comments when he last fought, had basically ruined any chance he had in the UFC. So those are a couple of his wins. So don't think he's had amazing fights for all of his different fights, but decent enough fighter. We'll see what happens. We'll see if this will be a good test for him, I think, because Diego brings the heat. Pretty ferocious guy in there, we'll say. Then we've got Cody Stamann and Alejandro Perez at bantamweight. Be another great fight. Both these guys have been in some great fights in the past, and I like the matchup. I think it's going to be good. Bantamweight has got a lot of talent right now, and a lot of guys that are sticking out. After you see them fight once or twice, you start to think, dang, I'd really like to see these guys fight again. And these are both those guys, Cody Stamann in particular, coming off some great recent fights and great wins. Then we've got another light heavyweight fight here. Misha Serkinov taking on an up-and-coming guy in Johnny Walker. This guy is, appears to be the next hype train, if you will. They've bumped him up now. I think he's at the bottom of the light heavyweight rankings. Has fought twice in the UFC. Came in from the Contender Series. All have been amazing finishes. We'll say that for sure. Very exciting. His fight time has been very, very low because all wins, just winning super fast, basically. Just destroy. I'm thinking back to it right now when he fought Khalil Roundtree Jr. and just brought him in the clinch and just blasted him with elbows and just that was that was crazy to see, man. Very exciting though. And then his last fight in I think Fortaleza, all of 30 seconds, blasted Justin Ledet, took him down. We'll see what happens here. Is it going to be a guy like Misha to slow the hype train down at all, or is it going to be another devastating finish? We shall see. Nonetheless, going to be very, very exciting. Now, here we have, guys, what is equally worthy of being on the pay-per-view. The thing is, apparently these main events of each prelim, early prelim, whatever, is still kind of a big deal in and of itself, and especially when it's on a pay-per-view, because this is essentially the last fight you would see on the so-called free portion of the event. The stuff that if you've got ESPN you don't have to pay extra for, meaning the pay-per-view. So could, realistically is the last fight of the night that a lot of people are going to see. And this is going to be, I assume, an amazing fight. Jeremy Stephens and Zabit. Totally looking forward to this. Zabit has been all over the place, becoming very well known with some, super, super exciting fights. That's been his big thing. Every fight he's been in that we've seen has been super exciting to watch. Obviously, he's won them all. Excellent record. And this guy to match him up with in Jeremy Stephens, people are saying this will be Zabit's real first test. Jeremy Stephens equally has been on a tear up until his most recent fight against Jose Aldo. No shame there to lose to Aldo. This is just going to be another excellent fight and going to be very, very exciting. So, like I said, guys, just let me know what you think. Hit me up on Twitter. Throw some stuff in the comments. You agree with what we're talking about here? Let me know what you thought of the predictions on the main card. Let me know what you're most excited for here in any part of the event. Just looking back here, even these, as they call prelims, a lot of people seem to feel that that's where some of the less exciting fights are going to be, but not tonight. I don't think so. I think this is just going to be totally great from start to finish. So, like I keep saying, guys, I can't wait. Going to be super, super exciting. And one other thing I wanted to just mention here, bit off topic. So we talked about the total of 4 current and former champs in the main card. Let's not forget the People's Champ himself. Show him first at the weigh-ins. My man Joe Rogan, rocking the absolute fabulous fanny pack, or whatever in the hell this thing actually is. If it is a fanny pack, it's surprisingly large. Looks to be designer in status. But regardless, oh my gosh, sorry guys, phone's going off here. Alright, so yeah, like I said, People's Champ Joe Rogan himself, rocking that designer fanny pack, or whatever in the hell that thing is. Looking good, so thank you, Joe. Appreciate that. So, alright, sorry guys, just had something come up there real quick. But getting right back into it, so I was just talking about UFC events in the month of March. We've got a huge month here as far as these events are concerned. So obviously not shown here is what we have tonight, March 2nd, UFC 235. For the rest of the month of March, pardon me. Coming up next weekend, Derek Lewis is coming back. Junior Dos Santos coming back from Wichita, Kansas. Then March 16th in London, we've got Darren the Gorilla Till coming back, and Masvidal finally making a return after a year and a half, 2 years, something like that. Coming back here. Then weekend of March the 23rd, Saturday, March 23rd. I'm definitely looking forward to this one, guys. I will be there live up here in Nashville. My dad and I are going. That's going to be a great time. Got a 4-hour or so drive from where I live here, just on the north side of Atlanta. So can't wait for that. That's going to be my first live event. Definitely looking forward to it. And then to wrap March up, on March 30 from Philadelphia, we've got Edson Barboza and Justin Gaethje. So another main event for Justin Gaethje, and another main event for Barboza. In fact, I think his most recent fights were main events also. So all looking to be good. Obviously, spread through all these events are going to be plenty of great fights. So this is a big month for the UFC. Lots and lots of stuff going on. Now, as we get done with March, we are going to get into our first event of April. This is going to be UFC 236. And just so happens that not too long ago, finally the tickets went on sale for UFC in Nashville. I was thinking, man, this is awesome. Finally something close enough to where I live that I can drive to and not have to have a ton of travel expense just to get to the actual event. So my dad and I got tickets for that. We're both going there. He lives up in Kentucky. Nashville is about halfway, 3.5, 4 hours for each of us, so it's a perfect place to go. And then, just a week or two later, UFC 236 starts getting talked about. They start hearing rumors about where it's going to be. Just so happens, April 13th of this year, UFC 236 is going to be right here in Atlanta. So, depending how much tickets are, I'm not sure how much more tickets are going to be for a pay-per-view event as opposed to like a fight night. But either way, definitely something else I'm going to be looking to go to. Obviously not a ton of fights announced yet. Recently the biggest one has been Max Holloway coming up as the featherweight champ, going up to lightweight for an interim lightweight title, given the prolonged absence of current champ Khabib Nurmagomedov. Allegedly, the fight was offered to Tony Ferguson. He turned it down for one reason or another. And Dustin Poirier was offered the fight, which he took. So this is going to be on April 13th. Credit to MMA Fighting for the little chart right here as far as the fights that have been announced thus far. Definitely looking forward to it. Definitely hope to see more excellent fights added to it. Like I said, this is definitely something I'm going to try to go to with not having to worry about a hotel and all this kind of stuff. This would be another perfect one to go to. Kind of ironic that the first live event I finally go to, and there happens to be another one just a couple weeks later right here in my hometown. Close enough to go to. So we're going to have 2 interim title fights on this as the main and co-main event. So we've got the lightweight interim title fight, and then we've got the middleweight interim title fight. So Kelvin Gastelum obviously was pulled from his title fight with Robert Whittaker after he pulled due to hernia and needing emergency surgery the day of the fight at UFC 234. It sounded like, hey, he's only got a 4 to 6 week recovery. We're going to be fine. No need for an interim. Within a week, that was seems to be out the window, and this fight was very quickly made for an interim middleweight title with Kelvin Gastelum and Israel Adesanya after the win over Anderson Silva last month at UFC 234. So other great additions to this card. Let's just run through it real quick. Boston Salmon and Khalid Taha. I'm not going to lie, I'm not too familiar with these folks. Wilson Hayes and Alexander Pantoja. Flyweight fight. Ovince St. Preux and Nikita Krylov at 205. That's looking to be a pretty good fight. I'd be excited for that one, especially to see everything live here. Montel Jackson and Andre Sukumtat at bantamweight. And then another fight. Love this fight. Definitely looking forward to this. I was waiting for your boy Eric Anders to get on that Nashville card. Once I knew I was going, I really wanted to see him live. Didn't work out for Nashville, obviously, but he's been matched up at 205 with Khalil Roundtree for UFC 236 right here in Atlanta. So I'll take that as well. That's fine. Still get an excellent chance to be able to see him live, which I'm very much looking forward to. And I very much hope that I can get to go to this event as well. Really hope the tickets aren't too bad with it being a pay-per-view. I'm not too familiar with how much it costs or anything like that. But hopefully everything's going to work out. And I'm going to check that one out as well. Right near my birthday, in fact. April 15th. This will be on April 13th. Last fight here. So this has actually since been scrapped. Paige Van Zandt and Poliana Botelho. I heard both were hurt. Not too sure on all the details, but I did see that Paige Van Zandt actually broke her arm again. So she is definitely going to be out of this fight. So UFC 236 is definitely coming together as well. Definitely looking good so far. I've got to say it's not quite as stacked as this event tonight with UFC 235 is, but still enough so that it should definitely turn out to be good. You know, interim title fights aren't quite the spectacle that title fights are, but still pretty good. So, hey, it's all good. Still something exciting. So, that being said, guys, I'm going to hang out for a little bit here. I'm going to take it easy. I'm going to go get a pizza or something here in a little bit. Get ready for this event tonight. It's going to be huge. Definitely recommend you guys check it out. Early prelims are on Fight Pass at 6 or 6:30. Main card is starting on ESPN at 8 Eastern, and then the pay-per-view is kicking off at 10 Eastern. If you don't buy pay-per-view a lot, guys, this is definitely one you want to catch. I have a feeling this is going to be a really, really good one, so don't miss it. All that being said, guys, always say I love to hear your feedback. Thank you very much for tuning in to the 4th episode of the Hammerfist MMA Podcast. My name is Tyler. Hit that like button below. Hit that subscribe button. Come check us out. We've got usually a new one every 2 weeks or so. Hit me up on Twitter at Hammerfist_MMA. Check out the blog, hammerfistmma.com. Like I said, guys, thank you very much for watching. and we will catch you next time. Thanks again.